Jerome's voice was trembling with anger. Mike, you're a white man. You'll never understand. A 25-year partnership felt like it was ending in an instant. Mike quietly bowed his head. But at that moment, on the other side of the park, a young black man was lying on the ground, losing blood. And as police sirens grew louder, Jerome had no idea that what Mike was about to do would teach him the greatest lesson of his life. If you support racial justice, subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Jerome Davis was 62 years old, a tall, strong black man. Mike Sullivan was 64, medium height, with grey hair, a white man. Both were retired from the Detroit Police Department. Jerome retired 3 years ago. Mike 2 years ago. They had been partners for 25 years. Same squad car, same streets, same dangers. Jerome had been a street cop, Mike a detective. Both had seen Detroit's toughest neighborhoods. That Wednesday evening, as usual, they met at Lincoln Park Cafe. Even in retirement, they kept their weekly meetups. They'd reminisce about old days, sip coffee, and keep their friendship alive. Jerome, the weather's nice today, Mike said, taking a sip of his coffee. Maybe we go for a walk. Jerome didn't answer. His eyes were fixed outside the window. Something was happening on Park Avenue. Two police cars had surrounded a young black man. The kid looked about 19 or 20, wearing a Detroit University sweatshirt. His hands were in the air. He looked scared. Mike, look at that, Jerome pointed. Mike turned to look. Probably a routine check. Doesn't seem like a big deal. Jerome's expression changed. Not a big deal. Mike, what did that kid do? I don't know, Jerome. Maybe an ID check. An ID check. Jerome's voice grew sharper. Mike, that kid was just walking. He looks like a college student. Mike shrugged. Jerome, the cops are doing their job. You know how this neighborhood is. Jerome stood up. This conversation felt all too familiar. Dozens of similar talks over 25 years with Mike. Mike, you'll never understand. What won't I understand, Jerome? Jerome took a deep breath. He had held this moment back for 25 years. But he couldn't anymore. You're a white man, Mike. You'll never understand. The cafe suddenly went quiet. Other customers had turned their attention toward them. Mike was stunned. This was the harshest conversation he had ever had with Jerome in 25 years. Jerome, what do you mean? Jerome locked eyes with him. The pain of 62 years poured from his gaze. Since I was 8 years old, my heart would race whenever I saw a cop. Has that ever happened to you? Mike couldn't answer. When I was 16, I got stopped 5 times walking home. They asked, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Mike, that was my neighborhood. Jerome's voice began to tremble. When I became a cop, my black friend said, you became one of them. My white friend said, now you're safe. But I was never safe. For the first time, Mike was truly listening. I partnered with you for 25 years. Mike, you're a good man. But you never wanted to see it. See what, Jerome? That in every young black man we stopped, I saw myself. If it were your son, would we have acted the same? Mike's face shifted. David, his own son, 22 years old. Why, a college graduate. Never once stopped by the police. Jerome, no, Mike. I stayed silent for 25 years. Because I love you. But I can't anymore. Jerome stood up. Maybe in retirement. We take separate paths. Mike's chest tightened. Was a 25-year friendship coming to an end. Just then, a gunshot rang out from outside. Bang, they both turned. Chaos on Park Avenue. The young black man was lying on the ground, bleeding. Jerome and Mike ran outside. The young man, Adry Williams, was lying on the ground, bleeding from his shoulder. What happened? Jerome asked the police officers. He tried to run, reached for his weapon. One officer replied. Jerome looked closely. There was no gun near Adry, only a school backpack. What weapon? Jerome asked. Well, maybe in his pocket. Jerome could tell the officer was lying. 25 years of experience. Mike, however, saw things differently. Jerome, the officers felt threatened. Threatened? Jerome shouted. Mike, this kid is a college student. He has books in his bag. Adry was moaning on the ground, losing blood. Did you call an ambulance? Jerome asked. It's on the way. The officer replied. Jerome knelt beside Adry. Son, stay calm. Help is coming. Adry looked at Jerome. Uncle, I was just going home. Jerome's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't Adry. This was 8-year-old Jerome, 16-year-old Jerome, 25-year-old Jerome, still scared despite wearing a police uniform. Mike saw the pain on Jerome's face, And for the first time, he understood. He truly understood. Mike looked at the young body lying in DeAndre's blood, the college sweatshirt, the school backpack, the fear in his eyes, and he thought of his own son, David. David would never be in this situation, because David was white. Jerome, Mike said quietly. What, Mike? I never understood. Jerome looked at Mike. For the first time in 25 years, he saw true awareness in Mike's eyes. Mike, it's too late. This kid is lying in a pool of blood. Mike stood up, 64 years old, a retired detective, but his sense of justice had never died. Jerome, this is wrong. I know it's wrong. It's been wrong for 25 years. No, Jerome, this incident is wrong. What happened to Adri is wrong. Mike turned to the officers. I'm retired Detective Mike Sullivan. Why was this kid shot? Sir, there was a threat. What threat? The kid was unarmed. The officer was uncomfortable. Retired cops were starting to ask questions. Sir, a report will be filed about this. Mike looked at Jerome. Jerome, what do you think about this? Jerome was surprised. Mike was asking his opinion. In 25 years, he never had. Mike, this kid is innocent. Not in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just the wrong color in the wrong society. Mike nodded. You're right, Jerome. And we have to do something about it. The ambulance arrived. Adri was taken to the hospital. The police officers were writing their reports, trying to cover up the incident. Mike and Jerome stood a bit farther away. Jerome, I've been wrong for 25 years. Mike, now let me talk. You were right. I'll never truly understand because I didn't live it, but I can learn. For the first time, Jerome looked at Mike differently. What do you want to learn? Mike, everything. Why Adri was afraid. Why you stayed silent for 25 years. And why I never saw it. Jerome took a deep breath. Mike, it might be too late. That kid is in the hospital. He might die. Then let's do something before it really is too late. Mike pulled out his phone. Some of my old contacts are still active. We can look into this. Jerome was surprised. Mike, why are you doing this? Mike looked into Jerome's eyes. Because for 25 years, you had my back. Now I'll stand for your justice. The next day, Mike and Jerome were sitting at the police station. Mike's old friends had opened doors for him. Mike, I read the incident report, said his former colleague Tom. There are some strange things. Like what? The officers said he reached for a weapon, but no weapon was ever found. And the security camera footage is missing. Jerome stepped in. Tom, that's no surprise. How many cases like this have we seen? Tom felt uneasy. Jerome was right. Mike had shifted into detective mode. Tom, where's the camera footage? They said it was a clerical error. Deleted. How convenient. Jerome added, Mike, this isn't the first thing that's happened to Adri. He was stopped last month too. How do you know? Because his uncle lives in the Riverside neighborhood. That was my old beat. An idea sparked in Mike's mind. Jerome, let's go see DeAndre's family. Why? Because I want to learn the truth. And you're going to teach me. DeAndre's family lived in Riverside in a modest house. His mother, Clara Williams, was 45 years old and a caregiver. His father, James Williams, was 48 and worked at the Ford factory. When Jerome and Mike knocked on the door, Clara was crying. Mrs. Williams, I'm Jerome Davis, a retired police officer. This is Mike Sullivan, my former partner. Clara looked at them suspiciously. Police? They shot Adri and now... Jerome interrupted. Mrs. Williams, we want to help Adri. How will you help? Mike answered, by finding the truth, by delivering justice. Clara looked at Mike. A white cop talking about justice. Do you really want to help? Jerome replied, Mrs. Williams, I'm a black man too. I was a cop for 25 years. I see myself in Adri. Clara opened the door. Inside, James Williams was sitting in the living room. His head was in his hands crying. Mr. Williams, Mike said, we are very sorry. James raised his head. Who are you? I'm retired cop Mike Sullivan. This is Jerome Davis. James stood up. Police. They shot Adri. And now, Jerome stepped in. Mr. Williams, we're different. We want justice for Adri. Justice. James laughed bitterly. I've lived in this city for 25 years. I've never seen justice. Mike looked at Jerome. He was starting to understand this pain. Mr. Williams, what was Adri doing that day? Coming back from college. He had been studying in the library. He was going home. Clara added, Adri never caused trouble. He has a 4.0 GPA. He wants to study medicine. Mike's heart tightened, just like his own son David. But David would never get shot. Mrs. Williams, can you tell us about the previous incidents? What incidents? Jerome replied. Adri being stopped by police before. Clara and James exchanged looks. He was stopped 3 times last month, James said. Always the same excuse. What are you doing in this neighborhood? But that was his neighborhood. Mike said. Yes, Clara replied through tears. But Adri is black. That's his crime. For the first time, Mike truly understood. He understood the pain Jerome had carried for 25 years. The next day, Mike and Jerome were walking on Park Avenue inspecting the scene. Jerome, the police said the camera footage was deleted, but the businesses around here have cameras. Jerome looked around. Mike, that restaurant's camera might have caught the incident. They went inside the restaurant. The owner, Tony Ricci, was a 55-year-old Italian man. Tony, I'm retired Detective Mike Sullivan. This is Jerome Davis. Mike, long time no see. How are you? I'm good, Tony. I need a favor. Sure, Mike. What do you need? Last Wednesday evening, there was an incident outside. Your security camera might have recorded it. Tony's face changed. Mike, the police came. They asked for the footage. Did you give it to them? I gave them a copy, but I still have the original. Jerome and Mike exchanged looks. Tony, can we see that footage? Tony hesitated. Mike, this could put me in a tough spot. Jerome stepped in. Tony, that kid is innocent. We need your help for justice. Tony looked at Jerome, then at Mike. He had known Mike for 25 years. He was a good man, okay? But this stays between us. The security camera footage was clear. Adri was walking on Park Avenue, his backpack on his shoulder, talking on the phone. 2 police cars arrived. Adri stopped, raised his hands. The officers got out, drew their guns. Adri stepped back, looking scared. One of the officers was shouting, but there was no sound. Adri slowly put his backpack down. Then one officer fired. Adri fell to the ground. Mike was frozen. Jerome, that kid did nothing. I know, Mike. I've known for 25 years. Mike watched the footage again. Jerome, Adri isn't trying to run. He's not reaching for a weapon. He's just scared. Yes, Mike. And that's why he was shot. Because he's black. For the first time, Mike understood what racial justice meant. Jerome, we have to give this footage to the prosecutor. Mike, are you really ready to do that? To face your old colleagues? Mike looked at Jerome, 64 years old, a retired detective. But for the first time in his life, he was seeing true justice. Jerome, for 25 years you had my back. Now I'll have yours. The next week, Mike and Jerome sat in Prosecutor Sarah Johnson's office. They had brought the security footage. Prosecutor Johnson, this footage doesn't match the police report statements. Mike said. Sarah watched the footage. Her face changed. This is very serious. Adri Williams really looks innocent. Jerome interrupted. Prosecutor Johnson, this is not just DeAndre's case. How many other kids have been victimized like this? Sarah took a deep breath. Detective Davis, you're right, but changing this system is not easy. Mike replied. Prosecutor Johnson, I worked in this system for 25 years, and I never noticed. But now I do, and it's time for change. What do you suggest? Jerome answered. First, justice for Adri, then system reform. Sarah agreed. I will reopen this case, and this footage will be evidence. 3 months later, the Adri Williams case was being heard in court. Adri had recovered, but he had permanent damage to his shoulder. Mike and Jerome sat in the witness stand. Detective Sullivan, the prosecutor, asked, You served 25 years as a police officer. What do you think about this incident? Mike stood up. This incident opened my eyes. Adri Williams was an innocent young man, and he was shot because of racial profiling. The defense attorney objected. Detective Sullivan, that is a very serious accusation. Mike replied, For 25 years I ignore this truth. I can no longer ignore it. Jerome also testified. I served 25 years as a police officer, and I always noticed black kids are treated differently. Adri is the latest example. The court gave its verdict. The police officer was guilty. Compensation would be paid to Adri. After the trial, Mike and Jerome were walking on Park Avenue, the same place where Adri was shot. Jerome, will you forgive me? Forgive what, Mike? Turning a blind eye for 25 years. Not understanding your pain. Jerome stopped, looked at Mike. In his 62 years of life, this was the first time he had heard these words from a white friend. Mike, it's not about forgiveness. It's about learning. What should I learn? You have to keep learning every day. See your privilege. Practice empathy. Mike nodded. Jerome, I'm ready to do that. Just promising isn't enough, Mike. Action is needed. What kind of action? Jerome smiled. A community policing program. Let's educate young people about the police. Let's break down prejudices. Mike's eyes lit up. Perfect idea. I'll join too. 6 months later, Jerome and Mike were running the Fair Policing program together. Every week, they gave police training to young black and white kids trying to break down prejudices. Adri Williams was also participating in the program, despite his shoulder injury. He continued his medical studies. That Saturday morning, Jerome and Mike were sitting in the same coffee shop. But this time, they were talking differently. Mike, I'm sorry I stayed silent for 25 years. Jerome, you didn't stay silent. I didn't listen. They looked at each other. A 25-year friendship was finally being built on real foundations. Jerome, now I understand. When you said you'll never understand, you meant my experience. Yes, Mike, but you can empathize. You can support. Mike nodded, and I can keep learning. At that moment, Adri entered the coffee shop. He saw Mike and Jerome and smiled. Hello, Mr. Davis, Mr. Sullivan. Hello, Adri, they answered together. Adri sat down. What are we doing in the program today? Jerome answered, today Mike will talk about his privilege. Mike smiled. And Jerome about his experience. Adri agreed. That's very important, because both are necessary. Jerome looked at Mike. Mike, after 25 years, you've finally become my true partner. Mike replied, Jerome, I'm 25 years late. But it's never too late. Adri added, Mr. Sullivan, you've been able to change. That's hopeful. Mike looked at Adri. The system that caused this young man to be shot was now changing. Because people could change. Adri, you gave me the greatest lesson. How? To never stay silent in the face of injustice. Jerome smiled. Mike had truly learned. That evening, as the sun was setting, the three men sat talking in the coffee shop. Jerome, a 62-year-old black retired cop. Mike, a 64-year-old white retired detective. Adri, a 19-year-old black college student. 3 different generations. 3 different experiences, but one common goal, justice. And Mike finally understood. The phrase you'll never understand was not a division but a call to empathize, learn, and change together. What Jerome had waited 25 years for had finally come true. True friendship, true understanding, true justice. If you believe in racial justice and equality, hit that subscribe button and join the conversation. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's build a community that learns, grows, and stands together for change. Your voice matters, so don't be shy, let me hear from you.